When it rains bad news, it pours. Derrek Cooper, five-star running back out of Chaminade, is Miami's top remaining recruiting target in the class of 2026. He's 7 days away from making his announcement, but now he's trending to land in the SEC.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I just need real football again, folks, because this offseason stuff, it was fun for a while. Starting to test my sanity at this point. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Miami Hurricanes radio network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On this Sunday episode, we're going to talk about just an insane Florida recruiting statistic, in addition to a South Florida recruiting statistic that's going to blow your mind. There's been a lot of bad news, not so good news, but there is one bit of good news that's coming in for Miami and recruiting. We'll talk about it, but at this moment, that good news does not concern Derrek Cooper, 24/7 Sports composite five-star recruit, one of South Florida's top football players, Chaminade Madonna. He's a stud running back. He's a two-way player. He actually wants to play both ways in college, linebacker or safety, in addition to playing running back. This is the sort of great local ambassador that you just can't afford to let him leave the area, let alone leave the state, which is the way this is starting to trend now. Same thing we would have said a few years ago about Ruben Bain. You can't let this kid leave. Miami was able to hold on to him, right? I mean, JJ now at Ohio State, people, have issues when I say his name, so I won't say his name out loud anymore. That was one you couldn't afford to lose, and you did. Malachi Toney was one Miami did keep that you couldn't afford to lose. Thank goodness for that one. And you now have 1 week, 7 days, because Derrek Cooper is announcing on July 20th, 1 week from today, next Sunday. And Miami had long been considered the trending leader. Suddenly, those trends and those projections are going towards the Texas Longhorns. Gabby Urrutia at Inside the U said he is close to changing his crystal ball from Miami over to Texas. Stephen Wagner at Kane Sport on 3 has already officially changed his RPM prediction from Miami over to the Texas Longhorns. We had talked about and we had wondered, a few weeks back, a couple weeks back, when Derrek Cooper, who had originally been scheduled to announce July 12th, that would have been yesterday, he moved his announcement back indefinitely at that point in time, said he needed to see more, needed to weigh more options, right? Before moving that date back indefinitely, Cooper seemed to be trending strongly towards Miami. When he moved that date back, one of the things that we had been hearing was he needed to hear out the Texas Longhorns, schedule a Texas visit. That suddenly Steve Sarkisian has entered the chat is basically what happened there. Texas really started recruiting for and trying to surge in Derrek Cooper's recruitment. And then, when he did end up pushing back the announcement just 8 days from the original date, July 20th, we talked about this a couple of days ago with Gio Milian. It was looking initially like things were still positive from Miami's point of view. That sentiment has really changed over the past 24, 36 hours or so. And with Cooper even mentioning, no matter who he ends up picking next Sunday, July 20th, he does plan to make an official visit to Texas in fall for a game day, which is another thing that's crazy about this, guys. The trends are starting to go in towards the Longhorns, even though Cooper has not even made an official visit to Texas. He has been there unofficially. April 26th, that weekend, he made an unofficial visit to the Texas Longhorns. So it's not that he's never been to their campus, but a number of schools, including Miami, have gotten the OV, the official visit from Cooper, and after his official to Miami, things seem to be trending really strongly. But Texas, without even having that official visit, has suddenly become kind of the, I'm not going to say complete consensus, but close to the consensus as to where the experts are seeing Cooper landing. And, why? And again, I'm not waving the flag of surrender because it's not over, right? And even on July 20th, when he makes a verbal commitment, it will not be over on that date. It's not officially over until National Signing Day. Of course, whoever gets that verbal commitment on July 20th is going to have a big advantage for the rest of the process. Everyone else will be playing from behind and playing catch up at that point. We hope Miami is the team that they're all playing from behind afterwards. But, you think about the factors here. Derrek Cooper, and I know at certain times he's been trending to other places. He was briefly a verbal commit to Georgia before backing off that Georgia commitment. And then for the past few months, it's really looked like a Miami versus Georgia tug of war for Cooper before Texas really began to surge here as of late. But this is a South Florida player who grew up, apparently, a Miami Hurricanes football fan. He's put out a photo of him as a very young child wearing Miami gear. And Miami has put literally years into recruiting Coop. He's made countless unofficial visits to campus, had an official visit to Miami last month. And Texas just kind of comes out of nowhere, and suddenly they become the trending leader. It's frustrating. And I know that every Miami fan right now is frustrated by this. But you look at it, and this is something we're going to talk about, folks, throughout this episode. What Miami actually needs to accomplish on the field this coming season to give themselves an easier time in recruiting. Because, past few years, Mario Cristobal has done a bang-up job. Like, even the class last year that ended up finishing outside the top 10, technically, we feel really good about, and I think Miami's coaches feel like that class was underrated. There's a lot of great players in that class of 2025. But things have not been easy these last couple of cycles. And I think a big factor here is Mario Cristobal, when he's in his first, few seasons at the helm at Miami, when you're in recruiting, you can sell players on what you're building for those first few cycles. But then you get to recruiting cycles 4 and 5, you've got to start selling them on what you've built. You can no longer sell them on what you're building. And Miami had a pretty good season last year. I mean, 10 wins. Cam Ward lit it up, and I'm sure he will continue to do so in the NFL. But ultimately, it was great, 10-win season. We hadn't had one of those in a long time down here. But Miami ultimately doesn't play for an ACC championship game. They don't play in the college football playoff. And for what it's worth, they lose their bowl game, which I think is kind of an overrated thing. I don't think people care that much about college football playoff bowls anymore. But it was a tough way to end the season. And Miami ultimately, despite getting to 10 wins, fell short of the vast majority of their goals from last year. So it becomes incrementally harder to sell players on your program when at a certain point you can't sell them on what you're building. You have to sell them on what you've built. And that's what makes this season. I know our guy, the truth teller, he says it and he's not wrong. Says it every time he's on here. We've got to win this year. Like, Miami has to go out and they have to kick Notre Dame's teeth in. They've got to win the ACC or at least come close to it and get into that college football playoff. Because in the case of Texas, who Cooper is now allegedly trending towards, they're on a great trajectory under Steve Sarkisian. 2 straight college football playoff appearances and a playoff win last year against Clemson. And, heading into this coming season, we'll see if he lives up to it. But we've got all the Arch Manning hype, right? Texas is a very hot program right now. Certainly, hotter than Miami, despite, Cam Ward obviously built some momentum for Miami. But Ward is already off to the NFL after a one-and-done season. So, again, it's certainly not over for Derrek Cooper. I just wanted to let you guys know where it stands right now, and it's not encouraging. And listen, 7 days when it comes to recruiting time, when you're building up to that announcement, 7 days recruiting time, it's like a dog year thing. Like, 7 days in recruiting is like 100 days in real life. Like, there's going to be a lot of phone calls being made, a lot of last ditch pitches that are going to be made to Derrek Cooper, not only by Miami and Texas, but Georgia and Ohio State and any other program that's still involved with Coop. Florida State was another program that he put in his top 5. So the conversations are going to be going crazy. His phone's going to be ringing off the hook for the next week. But as of right now, Miami doesn't seem to be in a good spot, and it is concerning. Now, the news is not all bad. there is a bit of I'm going to call it good news that I want to discuss when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here. It's Sunday. You can't ruin a weekend. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. We've all been there. Logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. That's how I got in to see AC/DC a couple of months ago. I didn't worry if the initial pre-sale got sold out. I got Game Time. I'm good, and I'm getting the best possible prices on this app, guys. If you're tired of strolling to find the best, scrolling, I should say, strolling. If you're tired of scrolling to find the best deal, Game Time zone pick deals give you the best seats in your section for you. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. And I love the features on Game Time. You get a panoramic view from your seat right there in the app before you buy, so you know exactly the angle and the view you're going to get on the stage. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets and concert shows with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. And I could already see what the comments are looking like here. This program broke Donno. We've never seen him this negative. Folks, I'm frustrated. I feel really good about the players that Miami has already landed in the class of 2026. And I'm not going to cry too much because as of this moment, Miami still has a top 10 class of 2026, including the top player in the country in Jackson Cantwell, who has shut his recruitment down. He's a Cane, wants to be a Cane, offensive lineman who wants to be developed by Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal. Not to mention, I feel good about the team that Miami is about to field in the 2025 season. We're getting great reviews from off-season workouts with Carson Beck. Miami is expected to have one of the best offensive lines in the entire country, should have a really explosive pass rush this year, should have a really good running game to go back to the offense for a second. And then defensively, I think the Hurricanes have made so many quality additions into the defensive backfield, linebacker with a guy like Mohamed Toure, who I think is going to make an immediate impact for the Hurricanes on the field. Like I feel good about the team that Miami's about to put on the field this year. And it's super necessary because, again, clearly there is a negative perception on what Miami has been for the past 20 years. And so the onus is to show this year that you can actually win something. All right. But I mentioned it's not all bad news out there. For one thing, we can be hopeful again today because another Miami Hurricanes target is yet to make an announcement, which is going to happen later on tonight, some point on Sunday evening. I haven't seen an exact time that's going to go down yet. So if somebody else has seen it, feel free to leave it in the comments. But 4-star safety Blake Stewart out of the Atlanta area. Now he has been trending to Clemson. So Miami's going to have to potentially pull off a little bit of an upset later tonight. But it's worth noting, Miami right now has 0 verbally committed safeties in the class of 2026. They've got 4, soon to be 5 cornerbacks. I'll tell you what I mean in just a second. But 0 safeties right now. Tyreek Green is one that Miami was trying to make a late push for yesterday. He ultimately, as expected, picked Georgia. So Georgia has a bunch of top safeties now committed. Clemson has a couple of safeties already committed. So I think Miami really needs to hammer down the fact that, hey, Blake, like you've got a quicker path to playing time if you choose Miami, because the safeties Miami already has. There's some older guys who are about to be, phased out of the program through graduation and whatever. We don't currently have any guys committed in this class of 2026. There is an opportunity if you come to Miami. So we'll see. We'll see if Miami can pull off a mild upset for Blake Stewart. But that's not the good news. That's the hopeful news. The good news is we're about to see a 2027 verbal commit become a 2026 commit and add something to this 2026 class, because Kenton Dobson III, who's one of the top players in the 2027 cycle, 4-star cornerback who's committed to Miami, grew up absolutely loving Miami, great family. He unfortunately he lost his mother, who was a big Miami fan, and his father seems like a great person, Kenton Jr. Kenton Dobson III, who's been committed to Miami since back in March. We talked about this last week. He kicks butt in the classroom as he does on the field, and he's on track to be able to graduate essentially a year and a half early from high school, that he's got one semester to go and he can graduate this upcoming December. So Dobson, and by the way, this is not something like Miami was like, hey, Kenton, we're struggling right now. Can you find a way to reclassify and come a year early? Because we need a dub here in 2026. That's not the way that this went down. This is something that Kenton Dobson wanted. And Dobson said it to Kane Sport, I think yesterday or early this morning. He has now gotten the green light from Miami to reclassify from 2027 to 2026, right? He's ahead on his academics, so he can graduate. Dobson made some really good points that, hey, if I have the opportunity to get into college a year early, you start that clock for my NFL career a year earlier, which is important to him. He's thinking very pragmatically and professionally. And then also I get better athletic training, superior coaching and resources if I get to college a year early versus staying in high school for the final year. So all of this just made too much sense for Kenton Dobson to reclassify. So he's going to be doing it. He mentioned he had to have a Zoom call first with Miami's coaches, because anytime you're going to reclassify, there's logistics that go into that, right? There's paperwork, right? You got to make sure, you've got room for another player. You have to figure out the NIL stuff and the revenue sharing math. And, Miami ultimately gives Dobson the green light to arrive a year early. So once that becomes official, that is going to be a boost to Miami's recruiting ranking for the class of 2026. Because again, Kenton Dobson he's one of the premier players in this class, and that is a local South Florida player. He's out of Miami Norland, which was the school where Duke Johnson went, the school where friend of the show Darren Smith went, a good Miami pipeline. So, Kenton Dobson, I will say that is good news, his willingness and his want to reclassify. All right, so I want to break down the factors when we come back as to, why you go from, a month of June where Miami couldn't miss. Everybody's committing. You get Vance Spafford to flip from Georgia. You get a Shari Charles, a big commit on the edge. You got so many. I think Miami had a run where they landed 6 players within 7 days. What it's going to take for Miami to get hot on the recruiting trail again. And I'll answer one of the most common questions that I get is, what is this disconnect now that Miami's having with players in South Florida and the state of Florida? Or is there a disconnect? But I've got a stat. It's going to blow your mind when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on Locked On Canes. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. And if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, sign up to become a Locked On Canes insider. Especially now that I'm back in the United States, I'm not touring Europe anymore. I got nothing but time to write updates to you guys. If you click the link in the show description below, become a Locked On Canes insider, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, show updates, recruiting updates, good or bad. Hopefully we get some good news in the near future. That, of course, we're heading towards the season starting up again. We're 50 days or 49 days away from Miami taking on Notre Dame. It can't come fast enough. Click the link below, become a Locked On Canes insider. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. give you a lot of added value there on the Locked On Canes Insider Chat. So, all right, this first stat is one that you probably already know because I've said it before on Locked On Canes. At this moment, Miami has one verbal commit from Dade, Broward County. One. And that's Jordan Campbell, the linebacker from Miami Northwestern. And oh, by the way, if you thought I was done with the bad news, Campbell, at various points, like after his Miami official visit about a month ago, had talked about shutting down his recruitment. It's not really shut down. He's now saying he plans to make official visits during game days this coming fall to other schools. I know Auburn was one of those. There was a couple of others he's going to make game day visits to. So, it's Miami's still going to have to keep playing defense between now and National Signing Day. I think December 20th this year is when that takes place. So the Jordan Campbell's recruitment is not truly shut down. Now he's a Miami commit. He's been saying most of the right things, but Miami still has to play defense there. But he's the only commit Miami has from Dade or Broward County. Miami, as we mentioned, has 3 times as many verbal commits from Orlando as they do from Miami, which is just weird. Hopefully we can change that before this cycle is over. And, after the reclassification of Kenton Dobson, who's a Miami-Dade kid from Norland, that would obviously change. But right now it's a weird stat. But here's another one. Brian Smith, our recruiting overlord, brought this to my attention. Of the top 50 rated recruits from the state of Florida, the top 50 from Florida, class of 2026, only 15 out of the top 50 are verbally committed to any combination of Miami, Florida State, and Florida. Only 15 out of 50. And I know what you're thinking. Well, how many of those are uncommitted? Only 5 of them are uncommitted. 45 out of 50 are currently verbal committed, and only 15 of them are set to land at one of Florida's big 3 in Florida State, Florida, and Miami, which is just kooky. And of the 5 that are uncommitted, 2 of them are guys that Miami has a realistic chance for, which includes Derrek Cooper, who we've talked about a lot today, and Brett Colajay, the 4-star offensive lineman out of IMG Academy. And yeah, the IMG guys are included. I know, they're not, can't necessarily call them Florida players, but, they go to a boarding school in the state of Florida. Like, I get it. Kenai Pepe is a kid from California who is at a boarding school in Florida. Brett Colajay from Colorado. But, they include IMG Academy as a Florida high school. So, for argument's sake, we'll just roll with that. But, yeah, the only 2 remaining that Miami has a realistic shot for uncommitted are Derrek Cooper, who's trending out of state now if he's trending towards Texas, and Brett Colajay, who I don't know. I don't know where he's trending right now. I know when we spoke to Gio Million a couple days ago, he still feels pretty good about Miami's chances for Colajay, but there's been a lot of Georgia buzz as well for him. And there's also been some USC buzz recently for Colajay. So there's a decent shot he ends up leaving the state of Florida. And same thing with Derrek Cooper. Decent shot, if not a more than likely shot, he ends up leaving the state of Florida. So it just goes to outline what a weird year it is. Because I think normally you'd say top 50 players in the Sunshine State. Surely about like 40 of the 50 are going to end up, or 35 of the 50 conservatively would end up at Miami or Florida State. But you got teams from other parts of the SEC and the South that are just absolutely raiding the top talent from Florida right now, which leads me to the question, why is Miami suddenly struggling to close on priority recruits when they weren't struggling a couple weeks ago, but they're struggling now to close priority recruits? And obviously there's some big picture stuff at play. And I'll be honest with you, it's easy for me to identify the what is happening. We just told you a lot of players trending out of South Florida, a lot of top Florida players trending out of the state, period. I can tell you the what. I have a harder time identifying the why is what I'm having a harder time with here. Now, there's a lot of possibilities. This is the one that I feel strongest about as to, why the Hurricanes are struggling to land some priority targets. Perhaps players are, and this is not unfair, perceiving Miami as a program where they are unlikely to win big, because history would tell you that. Over the past 20 years, Miami doesn't have a conference title. They don't have a playoff appearance. They have some signature wins, but fewer signature wins than a lot of these big programs in the SEC that some of these players are trending to, right? I mean, Miami's signature wins, you call stomping of Florida last year, going back several years, what Miami did to Notre Dame in 2017. Hopefully they do that again in 2025. You have to reach a little bit for signature wins compared to, some of these SEC programs who have so many more opportunities to get signature wins when you're playing the Alabamas and the Georgias and Texas now on a regular basis. So, Miami not having the recent success on the field, I think, is a huge factor, which is, again, why this team needs to start winning big. I mean, 10 wins was nice. It was a step in the right direction, but got to win the ACC. Got to get into the college football playoff this year. Other factors. The gap is growing between the SEC and the ACC when it comes to the profile of it. And you throw the Big Ten in there as well. I don't think the Big Ten is taking as many players from Florida. They do, although Ohio State takes top receivers on a regular basis. But, the Big Ten and the SEC, the gap is growing compared to the ACC when it comes to big game opportunities, college football playoff success, revenue. Everyone hears about these TV deals and all the stuff that comes with that. Perception of the ACC has probably never been lower than it is right now. Another thing that I wonder about, and this is like a good thing that is maybe not working out in positive ways, because I think it's a good thing that Mario Cristobal he's known for keeping it real with them, being honest, right? Not blowing too much smoke when it comes to, come in, I'll guarantee you a starting job, and I'll guarantee you this and that. Cristobal is usually, and a lot of players appreciate this. I think I would, knowing exactly where I stand and not having smoke blown up my you-know-what. But I have had people ask me, like, hey, is Cristobal too honest on the recruiting trail? Because you hear stories of, and there was a recent example of this. I won't name names, but maybe you can figure out who I'm talking about. A player that was reportedly guaranteed a starting job immediately, like freshman starting job, by a program that beat Miami and others for his verbal commitment. And that's just not something Miami does. They don't guarantee starting jobs, is certainly not as freshmen, to players. If they see someone as more of a developmental guy, they'll tell it like it is, right? Is Miami not blowing enough smoke? Because that's something that Miami does not do, right? A comment that I get a lot from my listeners and my Locked On Canes insiders is, when it comes to the local players, a lot of people say things to me like, hey, more than ever, kids who are born and raised in South Florida, they're wanting to leave home and get away for college, experience new things. I mean, maybe. It's never used to be the case during Miami's glory days. Guys were lining up to stay home. Top players were more than happy to stay in the area and put on for the crib. But apparently that is changing a little bit. So again, the point that I think Miami has the most control over is putting a winning product out on the field. I really think, and I'm not spinning this in a negative way. I'm excited for the opportunity. I think this upcoming season is really a do or die type of year, right? I mean, you took, a nice step forward last year with a 10-win season. Hadn't been done in 7 years at that time. You got to take another step this year. If you want to show top players that Miami is a premier destination, you have to show them you can come here. You can get to the college football playoff. You can win conference championships. We can create these signature moments together. I mean, if the stock is very high on Notre Dame, national runners up from last year, they come down to Miami. If Miami can make a statement and beat those Catholics down here, if the convicts can beat the Catholics down here, that's going to go a long way, right? There's been a lot of offseason buzz around Florida, who Miami handled last year. Miami can do that again and get a signature win at home against the Gators. It's going to go a long way, right? I mean, you got another opportunity to hopefully beat Florida State this year. SMU is on your regular season schedule. That's a team that raised their stock last year, getting into the college football playoff. So I hope Miami relishes this opportunity and goes out there, gets some signature wins, and accomplishes the goals that they fell just short of last year. Because I think it's going to take something like that. And listen, Miami's got a good NIL situation. Mario Cristobal is a proven elite recruiter. Recruiting is never going to be bad down here. And it's not bad right now. Again, I know we're complaining and nitpicking a lot of things. Miami at this moment has a top 10 class. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to sustain elite level recruiting, you've got to show it on the football field and show players. Like, this is not just a place where, hey, we've got good vibes down here and, you know, great looking campus, but you can actually come down here and win big games and raise your profile at the University of Miami. So I think that's what the Canes have to prove on the field this year. So we'll see what happens. Blake Stewart announcing tonight. You know, again, it's not necessarily expected to go Miami's way, but Miami really needs this, I think. You know, the Kenton Dobson reclassification is going to become official. And yeah, for Derrek Cooper, who now seems to be trending towards Texas, the clock is ticking. You got 7 days to change his mind. Then if you don't change his mind in 7 days, you've got another few months to try to flip him. So it ain't over till it's over. It's a great Yogi Berra once said, but we got a lot of work to do. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch on a Sunday. Make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us at Alex Donno, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.